We'll call to order the Douglas County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. Please note that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the Legislative Chamber alongside an automatic external defibrillator. Please stand for the pledge. We'll start with the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Fahey. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Here. First item of business are items A and B. A being the approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and B being a call for a meeting on set Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, as date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion by Morgan, second by Rogers. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll jump to our resolutions. Resolution C through F. Would the board move to vote in block?
Second.
Motion to approve C through F by Rogers, second by Morgan. Was there anybody here that wanted to discuss resolutions C, D, E, or F? If not, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll now go to item G, a protest of rejection of a homestead exemption for Alicia Urbiola at 3801 Polk Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68107. And Mr. Goodwillie is going to kick us off.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds Office. Ms. Urbiola owns the property at 3801 Polk Street. This is pretty straightforward. She applied for and received full homestead exemption in 2022 and 23. We never received the 24 application within the time frame set forth by law on June 30. As it turns out, had she gotten her application into us on time, she would have qualified for full homestead. And I think she's here and maybe has somebody with her, so I don't know if they would like to come up and speak.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Danish County Clerk,
Yes.
This is her daughter, Alejandra, and then Maria Ramirez from the clerk's office in case interpretations needed. So.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Pues nada más decir que tengo que decir lo que pasó.
No, no me si quiere decir qué pasó.
Oh.
Usted.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alicia Uriola daughters, and I'm help her all the time with his like doctor appointments or filling out papers, everything like that. And I help her in 2022 and 2023 to fill out the application. In 2024, she received early in 2024 the envelope with application, and she filled it up and sent it in, I believe, May 29. But after that, on December 2024, she got a tax statement, and she was surprised, and I came to the office and bring the copy, like, because she take a copy for her file, and I bring the copy. They received the copy in December 27, 2024, and they say they don't have any, like, under my mom file, and my mom make a letter because she was surprised, like, she's wondering why it happened this time because she did the same things in 2022 and 2023 and 2024, like with the envelope send it. And my mom said maybe it's misplaced in the office or something like that. And I say, okay, let's go check. Maybe that happened. But when I came to the office, they say, no, we don't receive any this time. But I told my mom maybe it's like if it was misplaced by the regular mail, maybe we can't do anything more because you don't have a proof. Because, but she write a letter explaining like what happened because, but she's doing the same thing every year. But now we asking for review the case, and that's all. Mhm.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think due to the circumstances and that she was eligible the other 2 years and had sent, and we don't know where it is, I would move to grant the homestead exemption at 3801 Polk Street.
Motion to grant the exemption, second by Commissioner Kavanaugh. Further discussion on the matter? Mr. Goodwillie, I'm assuming on top of this vote, if it passes, you would still need the application to come in late at that point, or how would that logistically work?
We will operate under the copy that they provided us, the one that they may have mailed and just never got there. So we'll use that. We'll use that application, including the income statement, is the way we'll treat that.
Got it. Thank you. Any other comments on this matter? If not, Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes, and the applicant here, is this your, I'm sorry, ma'am. Is this your property, your father's or your mother's property?
Oh, my mother's property.
Okay. And, you know, what we're doing here is saying, look, a mistake was made, good faith mistake. Don't do it again, okay? Make sure that it happens on time next time, okay?
Yeah, they told me I can bring the application at the office and they stamp it for me, and it's more safe like that. Like maybe it's no missing somewhere.
Very good. You're in my old neighborhood, so I have a feeling for you, and I appreciate your coming down here today, but this is just a one-time thing, so let's make sure it doesn't happen again, okay?
Okay. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you. Anybody else on this matter? Otherwise, there's a motion and second on the table to approve the exemption. Please vote.
Mr. Chair, did we want to include adjournment?
Sure can. Board's okay with that? All right.
All
Plus
right.
adjournment.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes Board of Equalization. We will now go into Board of Commissioners. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Commissioner Fahey. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Mr. Chair.
Here. First item of business are items 1A and B. A being the approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and B, the approval of claims submitted for payment process through Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. Do I have a motion and a second? Second. Motion by Rogers, second by Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda, items A through K. Do I have a motion and a second for discussion? Motion by Rogers, second by Morgan. Any items for discussion by anybody? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes, I'd just like to point out that item G, which is our annual approval of the Visitor Improvement Fund applications forms, kicks off the grant season for what this year is going to be about $5 million in grants to our community for a wide variety of events in the past, including everything from the College World Series to neighborhood parades to film festivals, food festivals, concerts. So please take note of this. If you're out there and you are a not-for-profit or a government entity in Douglas County, you would qualify to make application. I think the application the application period will open on March 17th and continue, Catherine, continues till about the middle of April. Catherine Hall is our administrator on this project.
Correct. If approved today, we'll aim to get the application posted by March 17th on Monday, and then it'll be open for 6 weeks, concluding April 25th.
So please pay attention to this. It's important for our community. It improves the quality of life for all of us, and it brings a lot of visitors to Omaha. So it's all good, and we want to have as many people participate in this as possible to spread the joy around our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on consent agenda? If not, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, thank you. We're going to go into section 4 for new business. We have one legislative item that was brought to our attention by some of the care staff and support staff at corrections that wanted us to consider supporting LB 608. Marcos, do you want to give just like a 20-second summary? I know it's pretty straightforward on LB 608.
Yeah. Marcus San Martin, Douglas County Administration. So commissioners, before you, and again, this is a request from the Department of Corrections, some staff over there, and this is LB 608. It was filed by Senator Bostar of Lincoln. This particular bill would expand what in prior years has been called the First Responder Recruitment and Retention Act. It deals with qualifying for your dependents qualifying for in-state tuition at state universities, and it would include it would expand that definition to include correctional officers and juvenile detention officers into the same set of qualifying occupations as professional firefighter and law enforcement officer under that act, the First Responder Recruitment and Retention Act. So again, it's only expands it to add juvenile detention officers and correctional officers.
Thank you, Marcos. And just as a reminder, under this program and still under this bill revision, the actual fund for the tuition reimbursement and support comes from the state. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. Very good. Do we have motion and second for discussion on this item to support? Motion by Kavanaugh. Second. Second by Morgan. Any discussions, thoughts, comments, questions? If not, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll go into section 5, recognitions, proclamations. We do have 4 employees that we are recognizing for their retirements. I don't believe any of them are here today, but I'll go ahead and go through all 4 here, and we can maybe vote in block. So first, we wanted to acknowledge Nicole Martin, who worked for the Communications Department for 25 years, as well as Vanessa Salikar, who worked for the Health Center for 27 years, and John Edward Michaud, who worked for the Department of Public Properties for 22 years. And lastly, Joseph A. Godick, who worked for the Department of Corrections for 16 years. So we want to acknowledge their service to the citizens of Douglas County and pass recognitions of their retirement. Second. Motion to approve. Seconds for all 4? Yes. All right. Any discussion? Otherwise, we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We'll move on to public hearings. We have one today. Item A, which is a text amendment update to the floodplain overlay section of Douglas County zoning regulations. Do we have anybody from Environmental Services that was going to comment? So at this moment, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing for comment on this item.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Stacy Gilman, Douglas County Floodplain Administrator. This is just an amendment to the floodplain regs that we need to adopt new flood insurance rate maps and flood insurance studies issued to the county by FEMA. FEMA requires these to be adopted before March 25th. And then also, in reviewing these, the DNR and FEMA also did a review of our regulations and ordinance and just made some minor changes to it, mainly for clarity and the addition of some definitions. Any questions?
Questions, comments? If not, thank you, Stacy. I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And what is the will of the board? Motion to approve by Borgeson, second by Rogers, and we'll vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thanks again. We'll go into our committees. Under finance, we have the budget report as presented. Then we'll go to Child and Youth Services, where we have two presentations today. The first one is a presentation on Douglas County Youth Center on February 2025 data.
That one right there?
Yes. Where am I clicking? Arrow over takes care of it. Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Good morning. I'm here to do a presentation on our February 2025 data. This presentation focuses on DCYC's population during February 2025. First, we have our average daily population levels since January 2023. From January to October 23, our average daily population was around 76 youth. We had a significant increase at the end of October, bringing our average daily population to around 97 youth until March of 2024. For 2024 as a whole, our average daily population was 88 kids. This is about 12 more youth than what we averaged in 2023. In August 2024, we started seeing a slow and gradual increase in our population of youth charged as adults, with a noticeable jump in December of 2024. Since January of 2025, our juvenile court average daily population has been decreasing, while our adult court average daily population continues to increase. Since the beginning of February, DCYC has been housing more youth charged as adults on a daily basis than youth charged in juvenile court. This next slide is our February 2025 population summary. In February, we had a low of 83 youth, an average daily population of 87, and we had a high of 94. 4 youth with charges in adult court were released in February,
and they had an average length of stay of 10 days. I know this is a change from what we have seen in the past. The reason for the change is because 2 youth bonded out within 4 days of entering the detention. 1 turned 18 and transferred to the Douglas County Correctional Center, and 1 served a sentence of 25 days for a traffic-related violation. We had 13 predisposition youth. They were released during February after about 63 days. We had 4 youth on juvenile probation who entered the facility with new charges. They were released after 58 days. And 9 probation youth admitted without new charges. They spent 53 days in detention. This next graph shows our monthly admission trends since January of 2023. The flatter admission trends during 2024 meant there were less of a month-to-month variation of youth entering DCYC compared to what we saw during 2023. We did see a notable decrease in our admission numbers during December 2024 and again in February 2025. This next slide is the February monthly admissions by offenses. We had 46 youth admitted into the youth center in February 2025, 6 in adult court, and 38 in juvenile court. We had 18 pre-adjudicated. 7 youth were admitted with new charges while on probation. 13 youth were admitted while on probation without new charges. 2 youth were admitted from Sarpy County. Youth were admitted for various reasons, ranging from weapons offenses, technical violations, various felonies, and various misdemeanors. This next slide is our February admissions of weapon offenses. We had 8 youth admitted for weapon offenses. We had 3 in adult court. 3 received new charges while they were on probation. 2 youth were admitted while on predisposition. We had 7 youth admitted for felony firearms. We had 4 firearm possession charges, 3 use of a firearm charge. 2 of the youth used their firearms in the commission of a homicide. And we had 1 youth with just a plain weapon possession charge. This next slide is our February 2025 other felony slide. We had 14 youth admitted with other felonies. We had zero of these youth were charged in adult court, and 14 of them were charged in juvenile court. The types of felonies the youth were admitted for range from drug possession to attempt of a Class 2A felony. This next slide shows youth admitted in February under misdemeanor charges. We had 1 admitted in adult court, and we had 5 admitted in juvenile court. The misdemeanor charges range from assault to obstruction. This next slide shows our technical violations for February 2025. We had 16 technical violations. 2 of these were in adult court and 14 in juvenile court. The admission reasons range from unlawful absence to a violation of a court order. We had 4 youth who were admitted under a technical violation whose original charge was a felony, and 12 youth whose original charges were misdemeanors. This next slide shows a snapshot of our population demographics on March 3rd of 2025. We had 89 youth in detention at that time. We had 2 from other jurisdictions, which was Sarpy County. We had 42 of the youth that were in adult court, and they represented 47% of the youth in the facility. And we had 45 youth in juvenile court, which represented 51% of the youth in the facility. 90% of the youth in the facility were of color, 57% were Black, 13% were Hispanic, 17% were Asian, 2% were Native American. 91% of the youth in the facility were males, and 10% were state wards. This next slide shows the youth in the facility on March 4th who had release orders. We had 4 youth with release orders as of March 4th, 2025. The average days they had been waiting since their release orders was 8 days. The placement types that they were waiting to be accepted to range from developmental disability group homes to foster care, shelters in the YRTC. The underlying charges that these youth came into the facility for were for sexual assault, class 2 felonies. The misdemeanors were disorderly conduct and obstruction of a peace officer. We're going to stop at this point in time because Abby's going to go ahead and present the CBA data. So if you have any questions, this will be time to ask me about this data that we have up here now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Randy. We'll jump in discussion on the DCYC detention data from February and a pinch of March. Because Abby, your part was the programmatic presentation? Correct. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Commissioner Cavanaugh?
Thank you. Thanks for this. On page 2, you have this graph that shows average daily population over time, going back to, I guess, 2023, so a couple of years back. It looks like at no time during that period has the average daily population been less than the low 60s. And since October, November of 23, the average daily population has been from 80 to over 100. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I'm just noting this because, as we all know, the kids' jail that was built and opened during this exact period across the street had a capacity, a usable capacity of about 44, so about half of the capacity. I think the actual capacity was 54, but with gender separation and things like that, it wouldn't have been possible to use it entirely. So no time during the existence of the kids' jail across the street, which costs tens of millions of dollars and has been empty since its opening, has it ever been adequate for the population that we see here, the average daily population that we see here. And I appreciate that because it doesn't look like the population's going down. As a matter of fact, if we go back to 23, the average daily population was 75, and your high last month was 94. So it's never, ever been close to the population for which the kids' jail was built. And I just point this out because for the entirety of this discussion, we have pointed out that this facility was inadequate from the planning stage to the construction stage, and now it's been open for a year or more, empty. That leaves us with the youth center at 42nd Street, which does have capacity, and thank God it does, because it looks like our population is staying at a pretty high level. And we talk about that in terms of, basically it looks like a couple, 3 populations. There are kids in juvenile court population. There's kids in the adult court population. And then we have a small group of kids from other jurisdictions, really single figures. But those two, adult court and juvenile court populations, are the bulk of this. And it looks like, from what you said, in the recent past, they've kind of switched over, where the juvenile court population used to be the bulk of the population, and now it's the adult court population that's the bulk of the population. Tell us a little bit about that. Those kids stay in our custody for much longer, don't they, the adult court kids?
Yes, they do. It tends to take anywhere from a year to a year and a half to complete the adult court process. So they tend to be with us for longer lengths of time.
Okay. And I'll come back to this, but that requires, long-term services for one population of kids longer than the other, which is important because they're all going through their education and doing things that normal kids do during that age. And we need to provide for that. And also, just having an adequate environment for them at 42nd Street looks like it's going to be the long-term need, again, as we pointed out from the beginning. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. Thank you.
Okay.
It's time, thank you. I'll take a quick round just to ask one specific question here. On the demographics slide, we have mentioned in passing a bit of a growing figure in that Asian demographic in the past, and 17% is quite large, considering I believe the Asian demographic overall is about 4% in Douglas County. I'm curious, kind of trying to peel through the layers of what this could look like and what it means in the actual community. Are we seeing that there are maybe pockets of where this kind of activity and demographic more specifically, because Asian's a very broad term, right? It could mean our refugee population from Burma and Myanmar, or it could mean Asian American population, which is quite different. What specifically are we seeing at the ground level in this very high 17% number under the Asian category?
It seems to be one pocket of youth. I'm not sure the ethnicity of them, but it seems to be a group of youth living in the same area that continue to be involved in generally gang activity, is what I can tell from most of the youth based on their charges. Mm-hmm. They're heavily involved in gangs, those youth, not the community, but those youth that are coming into the facility.
Mm-hmm. And by specific pocket, do you mean like a block or neighborhood, or?
It seems like some neighborhoods are involved in this, in the North Omaha area.
Gotcha. I think Sheriff have comment on that specific item. Yeah. Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Aaron Hansen. Yes, I would say that based on my knowledge, the primary challenge in these numbers is a specific refugee population. We are seeing challenges in that Burmese, the Karen. There is a gang known as KFAM, K402. Historically, they were created to kind of help protect themselves from local gangs, local street gangs. And then that progressed into firearms-related crimes themselves, traditional gang crimes that you would see. I do think it brings up a great point. We probably do need to focus more on assimilation efforts for vulnerable refugee populations. And unfortunately, similar to what we saw with the Sudanese refugee youth over the last few decades, we're seeing a similar outcome here. So I'm glad you brought that point up. It's worth looking at for sure.
Yeah, thank you. With that in mind, what's being mentioned, I'm wondering if on the kind of prevention, intervention, and outreach side, if you are aware of any programs that have been developed specifically for that demographic. Because we know with youth, it requires a lot of trust, a lot of relationship building. Typically, it helps if they can kind of relate to the person that's trying to outreach to them from perhaps the same community, et cetera. So do we have any of that going on for this demographic, or is that still yet to be developed?
Not currently in the facility, because we were actually just discussing this probably 2 weeks ago, that we need to figure out who to reach out to figure out who can come into the facility and start bridging the gap for these youth, because it's definitely a different culture that these youth have. So, it's harder to reach these youth at this current time. There's a trust issue and some other things taking place, that we do not understand.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, like, externally, more broadly in the community, how much of that has been developed yet? And maybe that's a question for Abby, if she's aware of anything. But my time is about up, so I'm going to keep going here and toss it to Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Following up on this, I note that the population consists of 90% of the population consists of kids of color, and that's remarkable in light of, I think, in our community, Douglas County, that's probably people of colors maybe in the 20%. So way, 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 way overrepresented, and that doesn't seem to change. Is that right? That's been that way for some time.
It's been pretty consistent over the years.
And I want to make it clear, you have no control over who comes to the youth center. You provide for the children when they're there, but they're brought to you by law enforcement and the courts. You have no control who comes there. But this is a troubling phenomena, and it goes through our entire correction system, where people of color are way overrepresented in the Douglas County Correction Center, and even more so in the youth center. And the percentages of kids of color are higher than the percentages of adults of color by, I don't know, almost 20%. Very, very troubling, and I want it on the record. You're not responsible, but somebody is, and this should be looked into. It's not something that really Douglas County or the Douglas County Board can really do a lot about. I mean, the people who put kids in the youth center are not county commissioners, and they're not the people at the Douglas County Youth Center. But that's a troubling phenomena, and it's been going on for too long, and we should, if we want to do something serious about kids in the justice system, look at that real hard. We've had recent discussions, and I know you have with other board members, about at long last taking some of the resources that should have been applied to the Douglas County Youth Center years ago, and instead of wasting them on construction projects that don't aid a single child, come to the youth center and do some remedial, long overdue construction. In my recent tours, it was very troubling to see steel beds that were come loose off the wall that we have children laying on. There are perfectly fine beds across the street, empty, of course, in an empty building. But in addition, I think we've had power failures about a year or so ago during a very, very cold period. We had power outages. I think there are roofing conditions that are substandard. You've experienced some leaks in the roof. And just the overall finish of the place, from the educational rooms to the recreational rooms, needs a redo. Is that right?
Yeah, we could stand some just to update the facility just a little bit. I don't know if we need to update it, but we can just refurbish some of the living areas where the youth are at. We've already refurbished 5 living units, and we have 6 that we have to complete. So we have done a lot of that. We just need to continue working on it coming up into this next fiscal year.
Well, with these increasingly high and rising numbers, we owe it to the children to do something to make this a better place, and I, for one, am committed to doing that going forward. I just wish we had squandered so many resources to get to this point, but we will commit to making a better environment for those children in our custody. And thank you and your staff for the great job you do. You really do under tough circumstances. It's not an easy job, but you do a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me, I guess, give an another perspective on this, and make a few corrections. Because there were some terms made that the usable bed capacity in the new facility across the street is 44 beds. That's false. It's 64 beds. There's no way you operate a facility with almost, 25% of it empty. That's not. Matter of fact, there's no organized body that says there's a set number that needs to be like at 80%. That's some ideal number. But when we had the spike that's noted here in October 2023, our capacity at the current facility is 96. We went over capacity. And the argument that's been made for years is, well, what if you go to a larger facility and you go over capacity? We've been over capacity. And when you go over capacity at that facility, you put every federal grant that we have in threat because of the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So I want to note that on the record. Then there was a point that was made about the population being from 60 to 100% and 60 to 100 and never being below a point to go in. That's false. Because when you're at 60, you don't count the point that, which if you go to slide 2, Rondi, that I want to point out. The point of saying that we were at 60 and 100 and we were never below, that's very misleading, because when we were at 60, you don't take into account that you probably have 10 to 20 kids that shouldn't be in there. And so if you do that, you have us at 40 and you're able to roll in. You have us there right now, close to going in from slide number 3, where it says 13 kids on predisposition. Well, no, not that slide. Slide 10. When you look at the kids that are there on juvenile charges, you have 16 kids on predisposition, which when the statement's made that we have no control over, no, predisposition is what the county has control over. And if we make a few tweaks, we can make that change right now. The 13 that are on probation with new charges, they're on probation. And if you're on probation legally, you're not supposed to sit there. And then you take the 6 on new charges. So if you take the 45 and what should properly be done in certain roles in the system, the statement that's made that we're never at a point to go in there is false. So I just want to note that on the record to correct that point. Now, the statement's been made is that we have these rising crime numbers. As I mentioned before last time we talked about this, when the police chief is in settings and saying that he has juvenile arrests that's been down by 100, when the mayor's there and saying the crime is down, and when Rondi's own numbers here say that the arrests are down, the core thing points to everything, which is the slide that talks about, at some point, and I think that's slide, one of the slides I'm looking for, but it talks to the length of stays. And really, when you get down to it, the core issue here is length of stays. The core issue here in adults that are charged higher, or the higher numbers that's flipped, is length of stays. Our adult stay time used to be at 9 months. Now we got adult stays at a year and a half. So when this picture is framed as it's more dangerous, no, it's not. Every point in the system is not doing their part, and we have length of stays that are there, and you have kids that are sitting on probation that by law should not be. And it's not even the point that they're sitting there 59 days. 59 days is too long. I can understand a week, 2 weeks, but you have a whole lack of capacity, which is putting us there. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the presentation? Eric?
Good morning. Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'd like to comment on the one page in regards to providers and youth served. Some of the statements about the good work, I'm sure, that is getting done. But over the years, there's been very few actual changes that allow what I read on here, such as the family-centered approach, 903 parents, guardians, 376 additional family members also served. That's not been true in most cases. I have a grandson that just turned 25, so he doesn't qualify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. over all of those years since about 6th grade. Additional family members have never been included, have never been talked to. Now, let me preface this by saying the fault with a lot of the failures of these programs is because of the privacy law, people's fear of discussing anything in a two-way conversation, such as right here. You're afraid you might offend me, I'm afraid I might offend you, and somebody throws a lawsuit. So let's don't talk two ways. We don't need to understand where he's touched. We'll send him in for assessment. I can see that in your faces whenever I'm up here. But that has not been the case, and I hope it is now, that you will allow a grandparent to talk with the provider. And as I understand the privacy laws, if it has to do with law enforcement, those things can be discussed. They can tell me what's wrong with my grandson, and I'll tell them why they're wrong. They need to know what I know about my grandson and helping him grow up and interacting with him more so than a lot did. Hunting, fishing. I know things about him that a therapist needs to know, but a therapist doesn't want to know. The therapist, over all these years, generally, we don't care what you think. You're not part of the team. We don't care what you know about your grandson. So don't tell me additional family members and then don't practice it. Tell them, look, you will discuss two ways with those additional family members that know more about them than you do, and maybe about the parent. Maybe he knows more about them than the parent. When I was growing up, my aunts and uncles knew a hell of a lot more about me than my parents did. Yes, if I got out of line, though, the telephone rang. So be careful what you're getting here, because I've had experience with the providers and the therapists who don't want to listen, who refute what I have to say. And that's part of the problem. Can you imagine the anger of a squirrel that is cornered in your bedroom and you're trying to catch him? Do you not think that some of these kids go through that? And then when a therapist tells me that, oh, I have to tell you, and I have to make your grandson tell you everything that he ever did before you can be a part of his team. Excuse me, is that therapy? I don't think so. He doesn't want me to know that. I know some of it, but he doesn't want me to know that. But that therapist is saying, you can't have your grandfather here unless you tell him everything. Is that therapy?
10 seconds.
No. So be careful what you ask for at the Douglas County Youth Center, because those are young skulls full of mush. They don't agree. They don't grow up until they're 25. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. We'll go to Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you. Randy, on the 13 that say 13 probation without new charges, that's just a violation of the existing probation
Yes.
conditions, like they didn't, give me an example.
We're talking about technical violations?
On page 5, you say 13 probation without new charges. So these are 13 kids that were on probation, they violated their probation, but they didn't come in with the new charge.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, can you chart for me, go back and chart for me, on page 6, there's the weapon offenses. Can you chart for gun charges for the last 3 years, what that has looked like for us?
Yes.
And then,
Abby says yes.
and then, no, I can't find my other question. Oh, the adult court charges. Can we go back and look at those as well in terms of what the trend has been the last 3 years? Because it is increasing so much. And I mean, gun charges and adult charges, I'm thinking might be one of the key issues, but I would like to see that data to make sure, so I'm not making wrong assumptions or wrong comments that aren't true.
Okay.
And then when it comes to, we talk forever about the population that we serve and the African Americans being the highest, the Hispanics, and now the Asians. And so, again, this conversation, I think, needs to be looked at in a systemic manner, in which what I mean by that is, are the African American, Hispanic, and now Asian populations being over-policed than the whites? Or is the systemic issue where because they're African American, Hispanic, or Asian, they're brought to the youth center and whites aren't? I think we need to have those discussions in order just to find out what it is. I mean, we can keep talking, we can keep pointing it out. It's not you, it's not us. It's us as a community and us as a system that needs to look at this and have those open, honest discussions about what's going on. And then maybe we can start figuring out how to rectify the increase or the high numbers of those minority populations that are in our youth and adult facilities. It's not a bad thing. It's just that we have to look at things differently, in my opinion, rather than just saying it. We need to actually take a look at that data. Are kids in West Omaha that are crashing through fences being sent home, but African Americans that are smashing fences being sent to the youth center? I don't know. But that's what I want to look at. That's what I want to see. What is happening in our community, and let's have that open and honest discussion so we can start to see or fix a trend in that downward trajectory rather than continuing to see it either stay the same or increase. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rondi, Commissioner Borgeson just made some really good points. And let me take it even further down the road a little bit. As I've been looking at these statistics and the information in regard to the Douglas County Youth Center over the last almost 5 years now, there's something in it that I've never seen, but let me preface that. Youth and adult crime statistics are, for the most part, they're pretty practical, okay? Now, the type of contact that a law enforcement officer is having with an individual, Commissioner Borgeson brought that up. There are some answers to the why. We don't have all those answers, but there are answers to it. Again, keeping in mind, at the county level, and Commissioner Kavanaugh brought this up, our role is capacity. We have to provide the infrastructure and the resources to deal with what the county attorney, public defender, and law enforcement actually thrust upon us. We have to provide that infrastructure. And that's where you've helped us on tours, and we can see what we're actually doing. But B, and this, I wouldn't say it's frustrating, but this is a key point, I think. When things become philosophical, and they do, in our society they become philosophical. We up here want to try to figure out why all this is happening, right? So then we start throwing out philosophical arguments or discussion pieces, and then we want answers. When things become philosophical, it becomes extremely complicated at the same time. It's multifaceted. There's a lot of reasons that youth are being detained. There's a lot of reasons youth and adults are being charged. One of them that nobody ever brings up because it's taboo, I guess. I said this in the legislature a long time ago, and everybody looked at me like I had horns sticking out of my head. The breakdown of the American family. No matter what that American family looks like, the breakdown of the American family, was there a dad at home? Was there a mother at home who was actually keeping track of this particular individual, this 13-year-old or 14-year-old? And when they were doing all that, where's the school's role right after that? What are they doing? Are they just going, well, this particular kid missed 18 days, boom, now they're on a list. We can't control the breakdown of the American family, but it's something statistically that we could actually look at. For example, let's say we had 90 youth at the Douglas County Youth Center. A family infrastructure, understanding what those 90 youth are dealing with, a family infrastructure, somebody actually on the front line saying, here's what this kid is going to be doing, is probably pretty important data. I'd like to see it. Not much I can do about it, but it helps answer some of those philosophical questions. Look, again, I don't have the answers. I can go through and figure out in my own mind about philosophically why crime statistics are going up and why we're detaining youth. But that doesn't, it's multifaceted, it's complicated, and there's a bunch of answers, and sometimes we don't have these answers because, like I said, I think a little bit of it is taboo. Let me give you one final example. Use my family for example. There were 4 youth that my wife and I raised. They're all adults now. None of them are in trouble, to the best of my knowledge. They're all adults. They're doing what they do. But what happens if my wife wasn't there? I mean, it's philosophical. I mean, we can guess. What happens if I wasn't there? My time is up. That was a rhetorical question.
We can come back if you want.
Thank you.
First, let me go to Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me continue on to build on some previous comments and talk a little bit about Commissioner Borgeson's, where she was at, and she was going, let's talk about the breakup by demographics. And I want to commend my colleague for bringing this statement up because it's been an issue here before I was on the board when the former juvenile court judge, Wadey Thomas, was here, and he brought that up into the system and has been here ever since, and that's the disparity in the system. I want to commend you for bringing it up, but we're about one person away from making a decision to make some change on that. So when it's said that we don't have no control over that, that's wrong. We got some control. And again, like I said before, I'm putting Olive Branch out here right now, but we're about one person from making a few changes that allows us to be able to get at that. And so if we're saying that we're concerned about that issue, then let's get together and make that go. Now, I want to say that the point that I was trying to make is that, you know, people are saying crime going up. No, this is not philosophical. This is quantitative. Crime's not going up. Police chief says it's not going up. The mayor says it's not going up. The key to all of this is page 3, where it says that 13 kids on predisposition, 63 days staying there. 4 kids on juvenile probation with new charges, 58 days. 9 kids on juvenile probation with new charges, 53 days. And as they may request, I want that request to Abby to give me the adult charges over the last 3 to 4 years and what those length of stays are. That's it. I definitely believe, well, there was a question asked to me one time. I had an interview in OPS for a job, and they asked me a question, define to me a kid at risk. And being young, 24, I went into what I probably learned over the years of a kid that comes from a disadvantaged home. And then when I got out the interview, somebody pulled me aside and said, your question to a kid at risk is every kid is at risk. Because any kid can get into something stupid, no matter what their family background or anything at that point. So I make that point to say, when I talk about this issue, I'm not talking about the 44 kids. There's something to talk about there that's in on adult charges. That's a whole nother matter. Because people think that my philosophy is no kid should be locked up. Not saying that. There's some kids that may need to do something there to some degree, but the kids I'm talking about are the ones that are sitting here for 63, 58, 53 days. And when it said we have no control, no, we have control. We can move in 3 months in that facility and make the whole system adjust. Because from the stat that Rodney has in here, where we got kids from other counties sitting in our jail, we're saying it's philosophical. No, it's not. It's about accountability. And we talk about accountability in this all the time. And people in the system are not being accountable. They are not. We need the new facility to open so people that say we need some type of long-term residential care, you can make that facility that. You can do that. And so what I'm saying is, when we talk about empty beds, I am all for putting kids in good conditions, but what I don't think we should do is put big amounts of money in the old facility to maintain it. You need to make that move and then put the money into the new facility to be that next degree of service that you need. So the kids that have those other degrees, so we can pretty much have a local YRTC that meets the needs of our judges and everything of that sort. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to the second round for Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You bring up a good point, Commissioner Friend, because there was actually a point in time in I don't think it's happened, and Kim or Abby can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a time when we started to see the increase in gun charges, the idea of contracting with one of our providers to go in and assess that family to see what else, if they have siblings, you know, what the issues are with the family that we might be able to assist in. But I don't think that's ever happened. But again, if it did, I apologize. But if it didn't, I think that we should have that conversation again. I wrote so sloppy, I can't. Oh, the other thing is, I have talked to many on this board about uses for the new facility, and it just hasn't gone anywhere. So I am requesting of our chair, Mr. Chair, I am requesting that we create a task force, and I don't have to be on it. I just want a task force to start talking about how do we get from point A to point B? What can the uses be? Is it going to be the normal use? Is it a specific use? Is it a new use? Let's have that conversation because that's never been had. So I just ask that because I'm really tired of kind of listening to the drawn out conversations and then not doing anything. But I think that there are, again, as Commissioner Rogers said, there are things we need to look at within the system that just are not working. We should not, and again, the youth center is not a placement facility. And that's where I think people have the wrong impression, just lock them up. They're going to get out. They're going to go someplace. But the issue right now is in order to get them to that place, they're sitting there too long. And so how do we fix that? What is the need? I mean, you listed a few of the needs on here when you said that they were waiting for developmental disability group homes, foster care, shelter, the YRTC. I've had many conversations with the state. The state's willing to work with us, figure it out. If that's not the angle we want to go, then what is the angle we want to go to use it? And again, then that's for this board to figure out how are we going to make that happen. But I agree with Commissioner Rogers. If our system worked, that facility would be great. We could then figure out what to do with the current facility. Again, long-term with many partners. They're out there. I've had those conversations with folks. They want to work with us. And so I think it's time that we just put these groups together and have those conversations and start looking at look at this as opportunity rather than a negative. And I think if we do that, if we switch our mindsets to the opportunities before us to help our youth and their families, I think we'll move faster and better than we have in the recent, last couple of years. And again, I keep looking at you when I'm talking, and it's not you. It's
all right.
us, Yeah, Sometimes I wish you would just sit down because I don't want you
I'm
to
here.
think I'm talking at you. I am talking with you to say, let's do this, let's work together and figure this out. So, thank you.
Thank you. We will go to a third 2-minute round for Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Thanks. One quick question. What's the average daily population today? Or just the population today?
Oh, it is today. Hold on, I can find it. $87.
I'm sorry?
87.
87, thank you. We've heard a lot of talk here over years and years about we need to have conversations, we need to fix the system, and now we want to have a task force. Years into this very expensive capital improvement where tens of millions of dollars have been wasted and not a single child has been helped. But we want to ignore all that and have more conversations and have more task force, ignoring the fact that this was supposed to be in place right now. These programs were supposed to have reduced this population right now. These conversations, these collaborations with other people, were supposed to have taken this off the table right now. And in fact, it hasn't. And so what we need to cop onto
20
is
seconds.
we have 87 kids today, more or less that number always, in a place that has been ignored in this entire process. So those kids over years now have been ignored in this entire process. Tens of millions has been wasted on an empty building that's not in use. And we need to focus on those children.
That's time, Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Commissioner Friend made this point. That's it. It's the kids. Let's do something for them now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to a third 2-minute round for Commissioner Rogers.
Statements being made like, not a single kid has been helped. That's crazy. When I first started working on this in 2006, there was an average daily population in there of 220 kids. So when you tell me nobody's been helped, that's crazy. Your implication of how you describe this makes it seem like it's good that the kids sit there in detention. So when you say that, I don't understand, because everything says that it's not good for the kid to sit there. When you keep, bringing this old battle up, nah, that's not. When you say nothing can be done, that's wrong, because something can be done right now for the move. We talk about accountability in the system. It is clear. Every data figure says this is length of stay, and it points to one point in the system. And when we don't hold that point accountable, it's allowed to be there. So if you want to talk about helping the kids, then the board needs to put the force between putting that system there and making that system work. Because right now, there are kids sitting in services in Douglas County from other parts of the state because that part of the system is not working at increased capacity, and we can't move kids out of DCYC. So when you say the number is 87, you continue to not say the fact that it's 87, but probably 20 of those kids shouldn't be there. That's the point that's there. And so when you talk about helping the kids, the point is not that it's good for them to be there. It's for them to be in a placement where they should be. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to anybody in the audience. Sheriff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Douglas County Sheriff Aaron Hansen. Just wanted to help give some context. There was a lot of good discussion, a lot of good questions that came up. And just as a reminder, myself and my agency, as well as my peer, Don Klein with the County Attorney's Office, always willing to help be the subject matter expert in law enforcement, whether it's here at these meetings or behind the scenes. Happy to help in any way. A few things I want to bring up. I think it was World Herald just reported this weekend the very unfortunate statistic that half of the juveniles involved in homicides in Douglas County last year were juvenile system involved. Half. That's a staggering statistic. And I think it goes back to Commissioner Rogers, your point. You were not wrong. You're right when Chief Schmatter mentions that juvenile crime overall has gone down slightly. But what that doesn't take into account is the other side of what Chief Schmatter is really focusing on and ringing the bell on very loudly, and that is that the high-risk kids are getting even more high risk. The repetitive felonious crimes, those are becoming even more high risk. Those are the ones that are traumatizing themselves further, finding themselves back in your detention facility quicker, and victimizing innocent people. The question about why do we have probation-involved youth that find their way back to the youth center for status offenses. I'll give you one example, and I'm sure, as an agency that handles the abscond warrants, this is probably not uncommon. The young man that murdered 8th grader Lenny Rodriguez in Hanscom Park. I was actually at that scene in my previous career. He had been placed in a non-secure alternative to detention, and he ran. And as a result, he had a abscond warrant, and my agency had to find him. And when he was placed in DCYC, although he did not pick up new charges, he was there on a technical violation for running. And then finally, Commissioner Borgeson, to your question about whether or not law enforcement is being consistent with regard to booking decisions for juveniles, I can assure you that we are. And actually, both my agency and the Omaha Police Department, we've taken great pains to have a consistent policy on juveniles that are being charged with felonies and serious felonies specifically, that they will be transported to the youth center with a recommendation to detain, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race or ethnicity, regardless of their socioeconomic class, regardless of where in the community that they are arrested. And ultimately, it's up to juvenile probation intake to decide if they're going to stay or be released. And again, DCSO always stands ready to be your subject matter expert in these law enforcement areas, because we're an important part of that overall puzzle as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anybody else on the first presentation? Keeping in mind, we do have a presentation on programming and actual programs that help our youth in our community, which has been brought up briefly. So we can go there unless there's anything else. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Borgeson, third 2-minute round.
I just want to make a point that while, yes, we need to focus on these high-risk kids, there are a whole lot of other kids out there that we are helping that, again, are kind of not being talked about. So when we only focus on the high risk and keep saying that we're failing them, it's not working, the system this, the system that, there are parts of the system that are working, because there are a whole lot of kids who are not coming back. There are a whole lot of families who are getting help. And there are a whole lot of kids that we have been able to help through these programs and services that we have provided. And so I just say that because it's always easy to focus on the bad, the worst, the high risk, the worst kids, and we have to. I get that. And again, kind of what Commissioner Rogers said, I'm not saying kids shouldn't be in the youth center. Yes, some kids have to be in the youth center. But again, to focus just solely on those and not all the other ones that we're helping, I think is disingenuous to our system that have many community providers that are doing excellent work out there in working with our children and working with our families so that they don't come back into the system, or try to get them so they don't even start in the system to begin with is like the ideal. So again, I think to flip that over and start talking about what's working, and again, keeping those high-risk youth, yes, we have to focus on those, but at the same time focusing on what is working for these other youth that we are helping youth and families for not coming back into the system. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of helping youth, I asked Kim and Abby today to think of a program that currently works with Douglas County that we can highlight. And so I will invite Dr. Carball to present.
So now, yep. Back to the, yes, back to the same one, right? Yeah, and then if you want to pull the other one up when we have Matt come up here. Okay, this one right here? Yes. And starts on 12. Thank you.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. I am going to give a brief overview of some of the youth served under our Community-Based Juvenile Services Aid Grant, or our CBA, over the last 6 months. And then we have Mr. Matt Allen here from Community-Based Services to talk about some of the specific things that he does with his program for youth in our community. So the CBA grant, this is money that we get directly from the state. We keep a portion of it to provide scholarships for youth served at the JAC. What I am talking about today is the majority of our funds, which are allocated directly to community-based providers to serve pre-adjudicated youth in the community. So between July 1st and December 31st of 2024, we funded 10 community providers. They served 633 unique youth in our community through 13 different programs. So the 10 organizations that we have listed on this slide are the African Immigrant Family Services, Boys Town South Omaha, Child Saving Institute, Completely Kids, Concord Mediation Center, the International Council for Refugees and Immigrants, Latino Center of the Midlands, Project Harmony, Reconnect, and U-Turn. So of these 10 providers, we have 4 that are focused specifically on immigrant and refugee populations. Commissioner Garcia, to your point earlier about our Asian youth served, we do have some grantees. I believe ICRI serves youth with Asian backgrounds, and we do have some providers under other grants that would serve some of that population as well. So while we had 633 unique youth, so individual kids who were served across these programs served 650 youth in total. So what that means is that some youth are involved in multiple programs, so we are able to serve or to address multiple needs. I also want to note that we do have our providers who are taking a family-centered approach and providing wraparound services for the youth and their families. So these providers, from the data that we collect from them, they also served 903 parents or guardians from the youth that they've served, and 376 additional family members, primarily other siblings. We do have demographics on these 633 kids. So the youth served in these prevention and early intervention programs, this mirrors what we just saw for DCYC. It mirrors what we see in the JAC and other points of the juvenile justice system. So 85% of the pre-adjudicated youth served were youth of color. Black and Hispanic accounted for just about 60%, and just over half of our CBA program participants were male. On the right-hand side of this slide, we do have a graphic that shows the age distribution. So slightly more than a third of the youth that we served were 13 years of age or younger. So we are really trying to target that younger population and try to address some of those early warning signs. And this data shows that through our CBA programming, we are able to do that. About another 31% were 14 or 15 years of age, and the other third were 16 years of age or older. And then the final slide that I have on our CBA participants is a heat map. This just shows where those CBA funded youth or the CBA program participants lived. Again, this is similar to what we've seen in some of our other system maps, with the majority living in the eastern half of Douglas County. About 2/3 of our participants lived in 8 zip codes within Douglas County, and about 36% of the participants lived in 68111, 68104, and 68107. So I would like to invite up Mr. Matt Allen. He is the president and CEO of Community-Based Services, which provides a variety of services for kids throughout Douglas County, including those at the Jack and served on our home program.
Hello, my name is Matthew Allen. I'm the CEO at Community-Based Services here in Omaha. We've been serving the Omaha and surrounding area since 2011. How we've evolved is kind of a snapshot. I started at Utah Holly when it was the old Utah Holly back in 2010, 2011. Back then we had what we called tracking, which was just monitoring kids as they would go home from placement. That's evolved from the tracking and ankle monitoring to youth coaching and family support services over the years, really just focusing on the youth's strengths instead of compliance-based models. We are contracted with probation, the Juvenile Assessment Center, Douglas County here. Who we are. We have a team of youth coaches and family support staff that are dedicated to strengthening the communities, and these are some of the ways that we do that through mentorship, life skills, personal growth and development, community safety, engaging in the community, empowering our youth, and building perseverance, integrity, and accountability. Our mission statement is to empower and support young individuals by providing mentorship, skill development, and a safe place for personal growth through leadership, training, creative expression, and community engagement. We help youth build confidence, resilience, and a sense of responsibility. By fostering inclusivity and collaboration, we equip the next generation with the tools they need to succeed in life, contribute positively to their communities, and create a brighter future for all. Our vision is to create a thriving community where every young person has the support, skills, and confidence to overcome challenges, achieve their goals, build a brighter future through mentorship, guidance, empowerment. We envision a world where youth are resilient, independent, and equipped to make positive contributions to our society. A little bit about our impact here. We've served over 2,200 youth here in Omaha. Some of the things that we measure that we've seen: increased school attendance, increased employment readiness, reduction in new criminal charges, and our pre-adjudicated success is something that I'm really excited about. So when a youth comes to our program, let's say through the home program, we get a referral from them. 92% of those kids that we work with, they usually end up going to probation, but 92% of those are successful with probation, oftentimes leaving probation earlier than later. So they get off earlier rather than later in their term. And so I really attribute that to really just relationship. Relationship is a big thing here. When you have an advocate that comes alongside of you through this whole process, and it's the same person, it's not a new person every 30 days. We have the same person in the home working with these young people. It really does make a difference, and we are seeing the success of that as they get put on probation. As a lot of these kids don't know where they're at, what they're doing. They don't know the process, but when they have somebody come alongside of them and advocate for them, it really does make a difference. And again, just some of the program benefits that I wanted to highlight. It's an individualized approach, mentorship and coaching, job readiness, training, employment support, family engagement and support system, community engagement, and social responsibility. I just wanted to highlight a couple of kids here that we've worked with that I really am proud of. The first picture, the gentleman on the left actually was shot at by the gentleman on the right. And so these are rival gang members that in our community that have tried to literally kill each other. And through coaching them individually with their parents' involvement and help of probation, we were able to get these kids to agree to meet each other. So I took them to a martial arts gym here in Omaha and did some kickboxing with them. And then we went out to McDonald's afterwards and had a meal. And so these two youth were able to meet these people who they only knew through their gang member name. They were able to meet them, understand them, talk about their families. And at the end of the meal, you know, they weren't best friends, but they were like, yeah, you're not so bad. You're pretty cool. And so the fact that we're able to do this, I feel like the relationship piece really transcends a lot of things in our community. And this is one that just shows you, like, kids need support. They need somebody to advocate for them. They need people in their corner while holding them accountable as well. And the gentleman on the right, we gave a scholarship to go to his first semester at college. And so that was something where they didn't have the resources. And as we know, kind of speaking to underlying things that I feel like make a difference, when youth don't have the basic needs in life, that's a common theme that we see. You know, when we don't have resources like the things that we take for granted, a place to lay your head at night, clothes, food, when we don't have these basic life needs, kids do crazy things. When they don't have the basic needs in life, it's a problem. And so how do we bridge those gaps? You know, we're plugged in with different resources. We can help families. We've helped them get furniture, beds, food, clothes. But when kids don't have these basic needs, it's a problem. And so those are just a couple of the kids that I wanted to highlight. There's my name and email and phone number if anybody needs that. But yeah, any questions from anybody?
Thank you so much. We'll go to Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Right. And thank you for this. I appreciate it. I have a question on the previous testifier.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
On the information that you provided us, I don't see a page number on this, but it is this page.
Yes.
Could you tell us the funding source for these organizations?
Yes, this is the CBA grant. So the state of Nebraska gives a block grant to every county, and then we do sub-awards to community-based providers. So this is money that we get from an allocation from the state of Nebraska.
Okay. And could you tell us per provider here how much they receive?
I can get that information for you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I'm sorry?
I can get that for you. I don't have it with me right here.
Oh, so we don't know how much we spend on this?
I personally don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get that for you.
Okay. Do we know how much the annual grant is?
I believe for this it was $1.7 million.
And that's the only source of funding for these programs?
That is the specific source of funding that I'm talking about today. So if these organizations have other source of income, but I'm talking specifically about the money we're granting them under the CBA funding.
Sure. What I'm trying to get at is the investment that Douglas County makes, whether it's our grant funding or other funding, in these programs. Do you have any idea what that amount of dollars is?
Not off the top of my head. I will get that for you.
Okay, that's kind of an important number to give us some scale of, you know, what our investment is here. And maybe you touched on this a moment ago, but is it all grant funded, or are there other sources of funding I thought you mentioned?
So we do have other grants to, I believe, like Project Harmony. We have a separate federal grant that we give them money through. We have other grants for
the 1.7 that comes from the state. What's the name of that grant?
It is the Community-Based Juvenile Services Aid.
I'm sorry, say again?
Community-Based Juvenile Services Aid. It's on slide 12.
Okay. Is Kim here? Yeah. Kim, could you give us a little more clarity on the dollar amounts we're talking about here?
Sure. With regards from the state of Nebraska, we get yearly community-based grant funds. Those come through the Nebraska Crime Commission. I believe this year, the current 2024-25 year, we got a little bit over 1.3 million.
Okay, this is the same amount of money.
That's the same amount of
Okay,
money. And this
okay.
is the one that you guys approve who gets awarded. We have a process that goes through and you guys approve it.
Right.
What Abby is talking about is also some of our federal grants that flow to specific organizations.
Yeah, and do they go through us or do they go direct to the organization?
They go through us and then to the organization.
Okay, do we have an idea of that amount of money?
Total between federal and state, I can get you an exact list. I want to say it's right at about 8.5 million.
Okay, that includes this 1.3 that we just
That would
discussed?
include this amount also.
Okay. Yeah, a breakout of that would be good. And going forward, when we do these things, it's good to know how much stuff costs. So, is there any other public or private money involved in this?
With the data you have before you today, no. We also do have the $5 million from a private funder that was used and approved by the board for the Juvenile Assessment Center and for some home program.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go to Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, could you come back up? I just wanted to thank you, thank the chair for having folks come because, as I said earlier, it seems like we always are focusing on the negative, and having you here and giving us some positives of the work that you do and the help that you're giving our kids and our family, I think is inspirational, and we need to hear more of that. So I just want to thank you for being here and doing that, and encourage you to keep up the good work because obviously what you're doing is working and you're helping our kids and our family, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Rogers.
Mr. Chair, so where are you located?
Omaha. Our office is on 81st and Fort. But we work in Douglas County. We have some in like District 6, which is like Fremont area, but we primarily Omaha, Douglas County area.
What was the address you said again?
8109 Fort Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what's your background?
So I started, I went to school for criminal justice. I worked in store security. I was a loss prevention manager for a large retail chain store here, and then I went from there to work at Utah Holly. And so I could kind of, when I was in the loss prevention field, I was taking people off the streets that were stealing, and then they would go to jail or go back home. And then once I moved to working for a group home, I kind of got to see what happens behind the scenes when kids that make choices like this get sent to a group home, what really happens. And you get to see the trauma that's happened with these youth. You've going to a group home and then seeing like kids not having their family come visit them on their birthdays and holidays, and they don't really get to go home as much as they should. They just don't have that love, right? And so a lot of what, if I could give you like a 10,000 foot view of what I see, is I see a lot of kids that we work with, they don't have hope, they don't have this hope, and they don't want the hope. They don't know what it is until you walk alongside of them and show them that, you're dealing with kids who are gang involved, who take pictures of themselves pretending to be dead to see what they look like when they get murdered, right? And if that doesn't speak to your heart, I mean, it's like, goodness, how do we change that? But it's through relationship, it's through accountability, and when kids do get detained, they hit that pause button, but they're coming back at some point, right? And now what are we gonna do with them? Whether it's a year or years later, I have one youth who's 25 now who I worked with when he was 17, and he completed everything successfully, but then made some bad choices and went to prison for 5 years and wrote me the whole time. And now he's back in society being a positive member, and he's successful, right? Success is different for all of us. And so, but it's through that relationship, that sustained relationship, that I feel like change happens. And it's not overnight. We're planting seeds and watering them. Sometimes we're not around to see those seeds sprout, right? But the hope is that they keep getting watered.
I saw you, do you primarily deal with kids on predisposition, or do you deal with other phases?
Probation, diversion, and pre-adjudication.
So you could probably get some kids through the JAC too?
Yep, we have quite a few there.
I mean, you got a wait list?
No, well,
No.
that we pride ourselves in not ever having a wait list, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with that is too, as we see diversity with the Asian population and Hispanics, you know, finding people in the communities to work with the kids in the community is really where we try to focus on, because I feel like we're more successful when we have people in that community working with those kids in that area.
Elaborate on, you pride yourself on not having a wait list. I'm curious
Correct.
about that.
Yeah, so I have a small caseload. I have about a dozen youth coaches, and so as we see a trend for more kids coming, I hire more staff. And so, you know, kids kind of ebb and flow with coming in pre-adjudicated or getting off probation. So once kids get off probation, then that youth coach can take on more kids. I have specific coaches for the JAC because I feel like that's just a different type of kid typically than probation. And some of the challenges are, you know, with probation, we might get a kid referred to us, but he's already picked up new charges, and so now it's kind of too late. Not too late, but I feel like with the pre-adjudicated side, we're in there from the beginning. The home program does a great job of partnering with us, and when we can get to that kid right away and walk them through the process, we're seeing a lot better results than when we get a youth that's like got court in 2 weeks and he's got new charges, and what are we going to do? It's like a
Thank you.
magic wand type thing.
Thank you. We'll go to Commissioner Cavanaugh.
I think Mr. Woodard is still here, yes? I have just one quick question for you. To kind of put this in perspective a little bit, we spend about $8.5 million more or less on these programs to 10 providers serving 633 children in 13 programs. What's the annual budget of the Douglas County Youth Center?
Last year it was 12 million, just over 12 million.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the presentation on programs? Commissioner Rogers?
Where'd the gentleman go?
He's right there.
Well, let me know before I ask you. I mean, it's just been phrased like we spend $8 million on 10 providers. I mean, it was clearly said that we spend $1 million on these 10 providers. The other $8 million are out there assigned to, there's a grant that we have with U-Turn. There's a grant that we have with Project Harmony. There's a grant that we have directly with some other people. So I think people just need to know we're not spending $8 million on 10 providers. We got a whole lot of other providers that we partner with, and we play the grant administrator for a whole lot of other people there. And you know, the 10 today are just from one pot of money. And that doesn't even count the people that we may have facilitated to do some other stuff there. So I just wanted to clear that up. But I want to ask you on the point, explain to me what you said. Okay, you don't have a wait list, but
Correct.
you got, explain to me how this works with your coaches.
Yes.
And how you make that flow. Because no place that I've talked to has not had a wait list, and the way you make it sound is just like, okay, we got more kids, I just find more providers. Explain to me
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah, so we're in the families' homes, right? We're not a facility, so that allows us to be mobile. And so one of the requirements through probation is that with youth coaching that there is no wait list. And so that's something that's challenging, but also it's very doable. And so the way I approach it typically is, you know, having the right coach for the right kid is very important. So when we interview these youth, I typically have a youth coach who I have in mind who will work very well with this particular individual. And so we have a caseload of, 8 to 10 kids per coach, and that ebbs and flows. We might have 2 or 3 that get discharged, and then so that youth coach would have availability to take more. I take a small caseload as well for I feel like the higher risk kids I do very well with. And so we have gang-specific youth coaches who have lived experience as gang members here in Omaha that have turned their life around and are really they can do work with those gang-involved youth that I just can't, just because of the relationship that they're able to build with that lived experience. So having bilingual folks in South Omaha is a huge thing too, right? Because just that relationship, the building off of that, when you have people in that community that are from that area, we're seeing a lot better results with that as well. Just more effective, more trust building, things of that nature.
So I'm curious, do you know the RAI score of the kid that you get, or do they share that with you?
Typically not, no.
I'm assuming you're getting well, no, that could be a gang-involved kid that didn't score over 9, so I'm assuming you're getting the 6 to 9 kid.
Correct.
Okay, okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Just as a quick follow-up to my colleague, Commissioner Rogers, about the model with staff and not having a wait list. A lot of small nonprofits do kind of struggle with capacity and cash flow because they may get assigned 20 kids one month, and the other month they only assign 3 kids, and therefore the reimbursement rate is less. And how do you sustain staff when it ebbs down for a little bit? So, and the struggle is definitely real. I've been there as a nonprofit manager myself, but under your model, I'm just curious: are your dozen coaches contractors, part-timers, full-timers? How do you maintain that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things that I feel like helps us be more successful is typically going back to the days when I was at Utah Holly. Bigger organizations have these types of programs that are kind of attached, but when I was at Utah Holly, they would use the funds for, when we would bring in funds for tracking, they called it, which is kind of an offshoot of what youth coaching is today. They would use those funds to pay for other areas because group homes typically don't do very well. They don't get reimbursed at a rate where it's sustainable. And so being that I'm just focused on youth coaching, I don't have a lot of overhead. The coaches, I think all of them are full-time except for one. They've been with me for years. And so when I can take the money that I get and pay them a wage where they can make a good living and they're not going anywhere, that makes a big difference with our kids, because at other organizations it might be a $10 to $12 an hour job and you've got a new youth coach every month. That's not helpful for the families and the kids. They need that same person that's there over the months until they're done. And so being that I don't have that overhead, it's very easy for me to pay the youth coaches more of the money. They make a good living. They have their families, and they're with me for 5-6 years now. And so I keep adding staff, but finding staff is challenging for all of us. I feel like finding the right person for the right kid can be challenging. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no, it's helpful, and the fact that almost all of them are full-time and you maintain them for that amount of time is pretty impressive. So good work there. Let me go to Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you. Your referrals, so like you get your referrals from us through either the home program or the JAC, besides other places, but that's where you get your referrals for youth, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you aren't funded through our community-based aid dollars. You're funded for a fee for service through our home and through the JAC.
Correct.
So again, our total budget is, there's many components to it. You being one of the service providers providing this service from referrals that are given to you through our home program or our JAC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And again, I just want to thank you, because I want to end this on a positive, inspirational note, and you did it for me, so thank you.
You're welcome. There's a lot of good things happening in the midst of how do we get better, right? We always want to get better and do more, but there are a lot of good things happening, and these kids are responding to that relationship piece when we're in there and they know that we're there to help and they can see that we're an advocate for them. It makes a difference. And we still have kids that do things that they shouldn't, right? But that's part of learning and developing, and so I'm hopeful for our future. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else on the presentation? If not, thanks again.
Thank you,
And
guys.
Dr. Carval, thank you. And we'll move forward on the agenda here. We did have under HR, weekly personnel report from civil service as presented. We do have a need for executive session, but before I take a motion on that, let me remind the public that next week we are on recess and return on March 25th. So with that being said, we do have a need for executive session for the purposes of labor negotiation, litigation, and legal advice. Do I have a motion and a second? Motion by Morgan. Second by Borgeson. Please vote.
Let's have it. Sorry about that.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. The board shall now go into executive session for the purposes of labor negotiation, litigation, and legal advice.
Motion to reconvene and adjourn by Commissioner Borgeson, second by Commissioner Rogers. The motion passed 4-0. Commissioners Fahey, Kavanaugh, and Garcia were absent. We were adjourned at 11:18 a.m.